So it's the late 90s, and Jim Carrey lands the role of eccentric comedian Andy Kaufman in the new biopic Man on the Moon. But instead of just playing Andy Kaufman, Jim goes, "I've got an idea. Instead of being Jim Carrey and acting like Andy Kaufman, I'm going to become Andy Kaufman." So here we are in 1998 on set, and it really feels like Andy Kaufman is alive again. Jim Carrey has vanished into the role with insane dedication, and trust me, everyone around him, the director, the cast, the crew is shook. They're witnessing Jim's wild method acting journey in real time, and it's unlike anything Hollywood's ever seen. So from day one of filming, Jim Carrey insists that everybody addresses him as Andy, and not Jim, or on some days Tony, as in Tony Clifton, Kaufman's obnoxious alter ego. So Jim becomes Andy Kaufman, and the thing is, most of the crew was going, "This is insane, I don't get paid enough for this." Like, what? I mean, he looks possessed, it's crazy. But I need the money.
I can't eat! I'm broke, nigga! I'm broke!
In fact, co-star Jerry Lawler, a wrestler who knew the real Andy, later says, "It was my understanding that you don't talk to Jim Carrey. He's either Andy or nothing." And Lawler was not exactly exaggerating. For about 4 months, Jim rarely breaks character at all. He was only himself for a handful of times during the entire shoot. Even Andy's friend Bob Zamuda said, "We shot for 85 days. Jim Carrey was only there for 2 days. The rest of the time he was either Andy or he was Tony." The commitment is so intense that even director Milo Forman, an Oscar-winning veteran, is stunned.
I can sincerely say that during the shooting of Men on the Moon, I met Jim Carrey only twice. And that was 2 Saturdays when we had dinner.
So, everyone on set has to play along with Jim's method madness, or risk derailing the movie. And Jim, well, he believes that Andy Kaufman's genius demands nothing less. The true author of this project is Andy and his genius. I don't feel like I made the film at all. I feel like Andy made the film. By erasing Jim Carrey, he hopes Andy's spirit will shine through. And the thing is, to most of the crew, it looked like it was equal parts admirable and disturbing. And it's almost as if Jim Carrey was possessed. Now, put yourself in director Milo Forman's shoes. He's responsible for keeping this film on track, but his leading man is acting like a possessed prankster 24/7. At first, Forman is frustrated and doesn't quite know how to direct Andy Kaufman or Tony Clifton. So, about 2 weeks into shooting, Forman goes, "Okay, enough is enough." And he ends up calling Jim's manager, or perhaps Jim himself, in desperation. So Milo's basically like, "I have never been intimidated by another man, and I am intimidated by Tony Clifton." Now don't get it wrong, Milo Forman was a seasoned director, but Jim's commitment is pushing him to the edge. So how does Jim respond? In true Kaufman-esque fashion, Jim, speaking as himself for a change, calmly says, "Well, we could fire them," meaning fire Andy and Tony, "and I could do an impression. I'm a really good impressionist. I could do a pretty good imitation of both of them." In essence, he basically offered to drop the act, to stop being Andy and Tony, and just play their role normally. However, this is where things take a turn. Suddenly, Milo decides to embrace the madness, and he says, "No, I don't want it to stop. I just wanted to talk to Jim." And he's essentially saying, "Okay, you can keep being crazy, but I just miss the real you sometimes." And from that point forward, Forman plays along with Carrey's method. As bizarre and difficult as it is, Milo starts treating Andy and Tony almost like they're 2 separate actors. There are even times when Milo would say, "Please let me talk to Jim Carrey. Can I talk to Jim Carrey?" And then Jim, who was now acting like Tony, would say, "I'll ask him to call you," and then he would wander off the set.
The interesting thing that I heard about the way Milos was working was that at first he was a little annoyed that, that he wasn't dealing with me, which I guess he thought he was going to be dealing a lot more with me when he first took the project on.
So despite these headaches, Forman comes to believe that Jim's outrageous method might actually be helping the movie. In fact, some of the crew were catching on to Jim's act, and they were going, "Hey, maybe this might work and I might be able to get another job after this." I felt like a fool, but then I noticed that the whole crew is enjoying watching our game, that it brings excitement on the set, that it really helped the movie. So, it was alright. Now the thing is, Sometimes Jim Carrey's immersive method leads to absolute madness. For example, actor Danny DeVito, who plays Andy's manager George Shapiro in the film and was Andy's friend in real life, arrives one morning only to find that he cannot get to set. Why? Because Tony Clifton, Jim in disguise, went, "Oh, I've got a good idea. I'm gonna lock Danny DeVito in his trailer, and then I'm gonna park a car in front of his door so that he cannot get out." Oh, genius.
You can't stop me no matter who you are.
So when Danny DeVito tries to get out of his trailer, he's like, "What the hell? Like, what's going on here?" And Jim is just there dying of laughter. So Danny's going, "Jim, hand me the keys or let me out. Do it fast." So Jim's like, "Oh, you mean these keys? Alright, let me help you out." "Gotcha, bitch." And then he chucks the keys in the river. So at this point, Danny is stuck banging on the window while the crew scrambles to get a tow truck. Shooting is then delayed and Tony is cackling because he finds it hilarious. And it's not just Danny. Nobody is safe from Jim's deep dive into Andy's world. Paul Giamatti, who plays Bob's Muda in the movie, remembers the days when Jim would come to set as Tony Clifton. According to Giamatti, he would walk by Jim Carrey on set and go, "Damn bro, you smell like crap.
You stink."
He was walking around with fucking stinky cheese in his pockets, and he was smearing stinky cheese on people. Now through all of this pandemonium, Milo Forman is trying to actually, film a movie. However, it's equal parts frustrating and exhilarating for him. Now one of the most infamous showdowns during filming comes courtesy of Jim's interaction with Jerry the King Lawler. And Jerry had a notorious staged feud with Kaufman in the early 80s. Now in real life, Andy and Jerry were actual buddies who pretended to hate each other for laughs. But Jim, immersed in Andy's mindset, decides to reignite the feud for real on set. Jerry Lawler arrives to play himself in the movie's wrestling scenes, expecting a very fun cameo. Instead, he gets Andy Kaufman 2.0, aka Jim, who refuses to break character and spends weeks provoking Lawler non-stop.
Well, Jim Carrey's an idiot. I'll just be honest with you.
And at first Jerry was a good sport, but after a while he began to lose it. While filming the reenactment of Andy and Lawler's big wrestling match, tensions finally explode. So the script calls for Lawler to perform a pile driver move on Andy, but Jim Carrey's not allowed to do the infamous stunt because it's dangerous, so they have a double ready. But here's the thing. Jim as Andy is adamant about doing it himself for authenticity. So Lawler, staying professional, abides by the rules and won't do the real pile driver on Jim. So Jim decides to force some real conflict, and as cameras roll, he spits right in Lawler's face. And this is where things get real. In that instant, the friendly charade drops and Lawler snaps. Lawler lunges forward at Jim and puts him in a headlock as he is genuinely furious. The set then erupts into chaos. The cast and crew then rush to pull them apart, but now it's like a bar brawl. Jim's personal bodyguard even jumps into the fray, and in the scuffle, the bodyguard mistakenly grabs Jim's legs, trying to protect him, and ends up mistakenly twisting Jim's neck while Lawler has got him in a headlock. Jim then goes down, claiming his neck is injured, and then they rush Jim to the hospital. Now for a brief moment everyone's going, "Oh no, Jim Carrey is hurt. I'm gonna be out of a job soon."
It's over. We are screwed.
Now Jim Carrey later says about this incident, "No one knew. My people didn't know if I was hurt. My managers didn't know. No one knew." But then Jim Carrey asked himself, what would Andy do? And committed to the bit. On set, as the dust settles, Jerry Lawler is both concerned and bewildered. He's thinking, did I just paralyze Jim Carrey? Or is this another Andy Kaufman prank? It turns out Jim's neck injury was real, but minor, and he was discharged in a few hours. So Jim Carrey, or should we say Andy, seizes the opportunity to milk this drama. He comes back wearing a neck brace just like Andy did, and he refuses to shoot any further scenes with Lawler, claiming he's truly angry. So now the tabloids get a hold of this news, and they're going, Jerry Lawler injured Jim Carrey. And Jim, well, he loves this. He loves the fact that the media is now getting into this, as it now brings more anticipation for this movie. Now, it wasn't all chaos on set. People who knew the real Andy Kaufman would come on set to visit Jim as Andy, and according to them, Jim was essentially a vessel for Andy. In fact, Andy's sister said he wasn't being shticky when he was being Andy with us. He was almost trying to give us a gift. I think Jim Carrey was a vessel. I do believe he allowed Andy to come through. Now, when the film finally wraps, the film crew are going, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's over. Why didn't I become a doctor or something?" But on the other hand, some of them were going, "Damn, I'm gonna miss this." Jim Carrey stays in character as Tony Clifton, performs a raunchy Clifton lounge act at the rap party. But the strangest part has yet to come. Because Jim has been playing Andy for so long, now he has to remember how to be Jim Carrey again. So by his own admission, when the project was finally over, he felt empty and lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. When the movie was over, I realized I was back in my problems. You felt so good when you were being Andy, cause you were free from yourself. You were on a vacation from Jim Carrey. So when the film comes out, the critics were going, Jim was really good in this movie, and he won the Golden Globe for Best Actor for this movie. So at the end of the day, Jim Carrey walked away exhausted and transformed. Milo Forman got his film, and one hell of a headache, and the world got a brilliant portrayal of Andy Kaufman and an infamous behind-the-scenes saga. So what do you think of Jim Carrey's portrayal of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon? Let me know down below. New video dropping soon. See you in the next one.